some things about urban politics because of the elections coming up. So I'm going to kind of skip ahead on the 26th of October and talk about how cities are put together, how politics is actually done, and how people can be more involved in participating in how the resources of the city are used. Right. So I want to say just a few things about the Civil War and then move on to Reconstruction, because Reconstruction changed America. I mean, it totally changed America. You know, usually we say the Civil War, Lincoln got elected, white folks got mad down south, and then they had a fight. That was it. But it was more than that. You know, the abolition movement had been going on where, you know, there were people, white and black, who were trying to end slavery through what they called moral suasion, like going around the town saying, this ain't right, you shouldn't do this, and blah, blah, blah. And black people had organizations then, and they made allies out of the white abolitionists, and they made allies out of women who were trying to get their rights as citizens. And two parties evolved, the Liberty Party and the Free Soil Party. And these were parties who wanted to end slavery, not because they were so nice, you know, because we got to remember that even abolitionists who were dead set against slavery, that didn't mean they wanted to live with black people. They were like, we cannot live in the same place. We got to find you someplace out west somewhere, or we got to go somewhere, but we can't live together, including Lincoln. Oh, yeah. And, but one of the things that caused it is that America was taking more land and moving further west. And a lot of people, a lot of white farmers wanted that to be land where they could just have their little farm and do their little thing. And they didn't want slavery to be there because they couldn't compete against it. I mean, how are you going to compete against a free workforce? You know? And so there were a lot of laws back and forth. We don't have to go into all of that. And so the Liberty Party was beginning to gain ground. But it failed, and so did the Free Soil Party. But what took its place was the Republican Party. Right. And the Republican Party was, their first candidate was Lincoln. And the South felt like, no, this is going to cause a problem, because the South felt like they were making buku bucks, right? I mean, they were making money hand over fist, because there had become an industrial process where you could process cloth and make a lot of clothes. I mean, nobody could ever done that before, right? So of course, this cotton industry they were making big money from England, because England was the ones that had the first textile mills. And so did the Northeast, like in Massachusetts and places like that. And the North wanted to industrialize. They wanted to farming was okay, but let's make some stuff too, because you can make some more money, and we have more different kind of tools and furniture and all that kind of stuff. So they wanted to put a tariff on stuff coming from England. And the South knew, well, if they put a tariff on things, then that means that that England will put a tariff on their stuff, right? Like, this is like Trump, 1865, 1860, right? And all tariff means is that in order for you to sell that in my country, you got to pay me a tax. That's all it means. And so when Lincoln was elected, they were like, oh, hell no. South was like, no, this ain't gonna work. So that they ceded from the Union, because they thought that Lincoln was going to free the slaves, because he had been a supporter of the Liberty Party, and he was in the Republican Party. Also, the South had a better military apparatus than the North had. But Lincoln was like, hey, okay, look, y'all, I know I said I didn't like slavery, and I don't, but I'm not going to end slavery just because I got elected president. You ain't got to trip out. You ain't got to trip. And the South was like, no, this is it. We ceding. And then, of course, now we know the war ensued. So yes, slavery was a part of it, but it was about making money too, right? It was about power. And for the first couple of years, the South was winning the war. The abolitionists, the women's suffragettes, and black political activists were pressing Lincoln to arm the black soldiers, right? But what he did was what we call the Emancipation Proclamation. Everybody said, oh, yes, he freed us today. And in a way he did, but the Emancipation Proclamation only said the slaves in the Confederacy, you know, those states who left the United States, those slaves are free. But if you lived in a slave state that did not cede from the Union, mainly Kentucky and Maryland, you were still a slave, right? And he said that if I could end this war without ending slavery, I would. And in fact, he was even looking for a place, as did other white people before, and black people too, to move black people out to the far west, or to move to Mexico, maybe Haiti, and some people were saying Africa. But you know, by that time, the black population was over a couple of million people. So you wasn't going to move us too easily. But, you know, Lincoln knew he was losing. He needed, you know, white men from the North. A lot of them, they were getting tired. They were getting tired because in those days, it's probably true today, but I don't know if it's true today. But rich people would pay poor people to go fight for them, right? But then you keep going out there and getting your butt kicked, and people coming up there, it's like, you know, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this no more. But they told black people that they could fight, right? And they willingly took up arms. And so somewhere between, we don't know, we still argue about this. You know, the academics, we argue about this. Somewhere between 250, 350,000 black men fought in the war. And they didn't only fight in the war, the skills that they had, because remember, there were plantations, yes. You know how you'll see the movies and there's a woman humming, you ever see a woman picking the cotton. Most slaves lived on farms, and they had different kinds of skills. And as we talked about last time, some of the places they took them from in Africa, they took them because of the skills that they had. And so they were carpenters, blacksmiths, different things like that during the war. They fought all over and helped to win the war. They helped turn the tide of the war. And so after the war was over with, and this is probably true of any war, you have a period that you call Reconstruction. Because you know you done tore up everything. That's why I think maybe I might be sort of a pacifist, because I think war makes no sense to me, right? Especially back in the days when they were running at each other with spears. You want me to take a spear and run toward that guy over there that has a spear? Oh, hell no, that ain't happening. But they tore up the South. When Sherman hit the South, they told him to take the South, and he took it. He was burning up stuff, blowing up stuff, killing folks. He was doing all kinds of stuff. And as he moved across the South, black people knew they were free, and they started following Sherman's army. They started following his army. And one of the things that soldiers really aren't equipped to do, politicians argue, is to deal with Reconstruction. They are trained to fight and kill. They ain't about trying to kill them, you know. But he had to. And so he did what we call Special Order 15. It's a military order that said that they had, on the East Coast, they had taken about 400,000 acres of land. And he said that what he would do is to break it up into 40 acres each and give it to black men to farm. And about 100,000 black men did get those farms at first. But politics was to change that soon after. So Reconstruction this real long, I can never remember. What did I do with that? Anyway, we have what we call the Freedmen's Bureau, but it was a much longer name, the Reclamation of Land, da 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 da. But it was called the Freedmen's Bureau, and the whole purpose of it, Congress passed this law, said, look, we have to rebuild the South. We got to help all the people who have been enslaved to be able to join the United States. And so in order to do this, the Freedmen's Bureau is supposed to protect the black people there by giving them the vote, by giving them the right to have contracts to work. So if you want this black man to work on your farm, you're going to have to give him a contract saying that you're going to pay him X amount of money, right? Black people had the right to sue and be sued. They had the right to run for office. And at that time, there were 16 black people in Congress, 2 governors, several people who were sheriffs. They helped to rebuild, or to rewrite, I should say, the constitutions for every state. Because, of course, we have the overall Constitution of the United States, but every state has a constitution. And so they had to rewrite the constitutions of every state in the Confederacy. And they were supposed to feed and clothe the ex-slaves and also white people who didn't have anything, to just try to feed and clothe them. The problem is that the Congress appropriated enough money for them to hire 900 agents to do these things. But they were doing it for 4 million people. There were 4 million people guesstimated after slavery, but it was like 500,000 in the North, but 3,500,000 or so in the South. And also, black people kept having conferences. Remember we talked about the 1840 conferences they had? Well, they were having conferences afterwards too. And the conferences that they had was the people who were free. A lot of them came down to the South to help those who were being freed from slavery, and said, okay, so we really got to work on changing these constitutions, and we got to run people for office, and we got to really get involved in politics. But the freedmen who had just got away from slavery were like, no, I want some land, I got to feed my family, I got to grow some food, this Freedmen's Bureau ain't going to be down here forever, and so I think we should put our resources into developing land. So they had this kind of break. Because the other ones were saying, well, how are you going to keep the land if you don't have political power? Okay. Right? And so they had a division there, and what they were concerned about, what the black people were concerned about is that we don't have a lot of power and resources, and we can't be splitting, trying to pursue one thing or the other. And I'm sure that there were some people who felt like, you should do both, right? So they were dealing with that. And meanwhile, Congress is trying to come up with laws to continue to help people to stay free. For example, they created a corporation that put together what we call the Freedmen's Bank, right? And so, in a minute, we're going to talk about the Civil War amendments and that kind of thing. But,
Senior moment.
What was I saying? The 14th Amendment said, in part, that people who had fought in the Union Army would get pensions, right? And plus the soldiers got paid when they were, warriors. Of course, they didn't get paid as much as white people, but it was 100% more than what they had before. You know what I'm saying? And you got to, our people know how to do, you got to do what you do with what you got. Okay? And that's what they were doing. So Freedmen's Bank, over the course of like 5 years, ended up with $2.5 million in it. Right? But what happened is that the money was not invested well. It was not run by black people. The people who ran the bank were white people. And they made some bad investments. And then they went to Frederick Douglass and they started losing money, right? They could put it on him, I guess. Right. But he took the presidency of the bank and put some of his own money in there trying to save it. But it went, it went bust. Black people were sheriffs. They started owning businesses. One of the things that the Freedmen's Bureau was able to do that was really important was they started over 4,000 schools for black kids, right? And black people, period, because at the time, there's this film I like a lot about Frederick Douglass when he found out how important it was to read. This white lady that he was enslaved by, she would teach him how to read when her husband wasn't there. And her husband came in and saw her doing that and went off on her and everything, and he was like, this reading stuff is important, right? And so they had these schools, and so yes, kids went to the schools, but also grown people wanted to know how to read and write. And so that was one of the things that they did. Now, in terms of the politics, you think about the way politics are now. People are trying to get position, they try to get more power, they do different things to try to do that, right? After the war was over with, I think, about 15, 20 minutes before they killed Lincoln?
Yeah. 15, 20 minutes.
He got killed pretty quick after the war was over with. And his vice president, of course, becomes president, Andrew Johnson. And Andrew Johnson is from Kentucky. He hates plantocracy. He hates the white people who think they're better than he is. But he ain't lost no love for black people, right? And so he turned over the special order number 15, the whole 40 acres and a mule. He started giving that land back to white people. He tried to turn back Reconstruction. And so the House, run by Republicans, they call them the radical Republicans, the House impeached him, right? And he went to trial in the Senate, because all impeach means is to indict. That's all it means, indict. So he was impeached by the House, but the trial had to be in the Senate. And he won by one vote. One vote in the Senate saved him from being taken out of the presidency. But they were able to put through a lot of legislation to try to help black people. So let's get the ones out of the way that I know you know. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, right? 13th Amendment did what? Abolish slavery.
Not really.
Except for
14th Amendment did what? Citizenship. But the 14th Amendment did a lot more. The 14th Amendment gave everybody due process. How can I say this? In the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights was how the federal government had to treat citizens. But states didn't have to follow that. They didn't have to give you due process. They didn't have to give you equal protection. But the 14th Amendment said, now every state has to give every citizen due process, right? And equal access. And so it did that. But the other thing the 14th Amendment did that we don't talk a lot about is that it said that the Confederacy would have to pay its own debt, that the U.S. government wasn't going to pay the debts of the Confederacy, right? And one of the reasons they put that there is because of the way the Constitution is organized. The way you choose people in the House of Representatives is based on population. In the Senate, everybody gets 2 senators. I don't care if you got 50 people in the state, you get 2 senators. But in the House, it's based on population. So if the slaves were made citizens, it would possibly mean that the South would have more representatives than the North. Right. And so they figured if the South takes over the House and the Senate, then they're going to use the U.S. Treasury to pay off their debt. Hell no. You ain't doing that. Right. So that is in the 14th Amendment, that the Confederacy is responsible for its own debt. Right. And then, of course, the 15th Amendment gave people the right to vote. Then there were two civil rights. Oh, that's what. Yeah. Got the amendment of the 14th Amendment. And then there were also other laws passed, because it's hard to make people do. And, people are going to do what they think is best for themselves. And so they passed the 1866 Civil Rights Act. We always talk about the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Altogether, I don't think I brought it with me. I'll bring it back to you next week. Up to now, we have probably about 10, 15 Civil Rights Acts. If we had the 1866 Civil Rights Act, can you put that up there? And it said that, anybody born in the United States is a citizen. You cannot hold people in slavery. I'm sorry, I didn't give you one of those. Oh, no, you're good. That's a chair. You cannot hold people in slavery. They have a right to be free. That was the 1866 Civil Rights Act that passed through Congress. And then, this is the first paragraph, and let people know what it does. And then, after the 1866 bill, because they trying to, you got a amendment to the Constitution that says, 13th Amendment says you can't enslave people. Damn it, now here's a law. You can't do that, right? And then, later on there was the 1875 Civil Rights Act. And the 1875 Civil Rights Act is virtually the same as the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You put the 1875, look at that. You can go anywhere you want to. You can't stop people from going to hotels. You can't stop black people from doing anything. 1875 Civil Rights Act. So you say, well, if they had that in, why did you have the 1964? Right? Because the 1875 Civil Rights Act was found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Because they said you cannot tell private businesses what they can and cannot do. Which is interesting, because with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, it's based on the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, which is, about the same thing. So that's pretty much what was going on. And I wanted to show you all these pictures in here of the people who served in Congress and the like. There were 16 congressmen, there were 2 governors, there were some mayors, and they were active. The last black Reconstruction congressman left Congress in like 1900. And in his speech when he left, he said, we will be back. We will be back. At some point, we will be back, right? And I thought about him when Obama was made president, And we're going to talk a lot about, the Congressional Black Caucus and all that on down the road. So I'm sure you know that white people, why do you think white people let black people be in office, help to write the constitutions, have forums and all this? Why do you think they did that? Well, you know they didn't like us.
Scared.
Get other black people on their side.
Huh?
Get a black following.
That's what I would call it. They didn't care about And we talked about that event, but they didn't care about that. Well, but you're, in a way, you're right, because the Republicans also, because, parties are always trying to get more votes.
What was the question?
Why do you think that white Southerners went along with having black people be able to vote, sue, take people to court, own land, do all these other things? Yes.
I think it's because they have no choice.
Why do they have a choice?
Because there are laws and everything that not only white people, but the laws, if they're gonna abide by their laws, they have to let black people in, minorities in, because if not, it's gonna look prejudiced. That's why they do dog whistling and stuff like that.
Okay,
You can't discriminate out loud if your law says you cannot discriminate. Because they can also
in the
discriminate.
20th century, I would say that's true.
Right, not back then.
But not then.
I think that they create like a black aristocracy. So if black people some black people had a vested interest in having slaves and land and all of this, they could keep the rest of us alive.
Number six and
It could be money, something to do with money.
Yeah.
To give an appearance to the other nations that they weren't as bad as they were made out to appear as they were.
Yeah.
seats and common.
Huh?
Number of seats and common.
Number of seats in Congress. It's much more straightforward than that. The Union Army was down there.
Oh.
They got a gun in your face.
Yeah.
I said you gonna pay that man, to work. Or if he wants to go to court, he can go. So it's because the Union Army was an occupying army. Right?
Fear.
That they had no choice. So then what happened? What happened was, we're back to politics again. The election of 1876 between, I think his name, Harding and Tilden, 1876 election. It was like a tie. The popular vote was like a tie. The Electoral College didn't do a lot, and we'll talk about Electoral College and all that down the road sometime. The point is that the presidential election ended up in the House of Representatives, because the Constitution says if it's a tie, then every state gets one vote. And they're still arguing back and forth what's going to happen. So the South said, look at here, I tell you what, because the Democratic Party was the Southern Party, right? And we're going to talk about how do we feel it. Yes. We're going to talk about that in another class. But they said, well, look, if you pull the Union Army out of the South, that Republican Party can win the election. We don't care. Right? Yeah.
It was Rutherford B. Hayes.
Yeah, Hayes. I said Harding, didn't I? Hayes.
Rutherford
Yeah.
B. Hayes.
And so they said, we'll let old boy win, but you got to pull the soldiers out of the South, right? And a lot of people, were tired. They were so tired of the Civil War. They were so tired of Reconstruction, and they spent a lot of money, right? Like we are now in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that. And people are like, would you just, or with Vietnam, I think that's a good example. Would you just stop it? Just come on out of there. And so they pulled the soldiers out. And so the black people were at the mercy of the white population. Because even though there were 4 million or 3.5 million black people in the South, only 350,000 black men had fought in the war. Right? And this is like 12 years after the war. So the guns they had, I don't know if they was even shooting anymore. You know what I'm saying? And so they were just at the mercy of the white population. So now we get to the part where somebody said, well, you want to make it look like you following the law, right? Somebody said that. So they come up with some ways to virtually re-enslave black people, right? They come up with what they call the black codes. The black codes said things like, codes, C-O-D-E-S, yeah. It said things like, If your granddaddy didn't vote, you can't vote. So your granddaddy was a slave, right? So how they gonna vote? Right?
Close that book for me.
You
Just
have to
close it.
quote parts of the Constitution. I'm a political scientist and I can quote it, but I ain't got it memorized. You know, how many beans in this jar? Right. Foolish. And then if you don't have a job, if you are not a farmer, that's the only job you have. And if you are a vagrant, then you broke the law. The state will arrest you, and then they lease you to plantation owners and white farmers to work. No pay, right? They took the children. If you had children around 10, 12 years old, they made them apprentices because they had to learn how to work. So they apprenticed your children to work for white people.
For free.
Right? You could no longer sue. You didn't have any rights in court. If by some chance in your county or whatever, you still could vote and get elected for something, they took offices that had been electoral offices and made them appointed. Right? So that, black people couldn't hold any offices. Right? You had to pay a tax if you wanted to do something outside of farming. In some places, you couldn't enter a town without approval.
Me like Indiana.
Yeah.
They could pay me to leave.
Yeah.
Give me some money. I'll see you later. You could not, of course, you couldn't testify against a white person. And you had to pay poll taxes. Now, the interesting thing about this to me, too, is I ain't surprised white folks did this. That doesn't surprise me. But what I find interesting is that poor white people went along with it.
Yes.
Because if everybody had to pay a poll tax, and if you were poor, they couldn't vote either. But they had what W.B. Du Bois called it a white tax. That poor white people accepted the way the economy was because they were better than somebody else.
Yeah.
And that seems to be something that people do, human people do. They kind of feel better than somebody else.
Right.
I don't know why that is, but it's true. So these kinds of acts made it impossible for black people to be able to live in the South. And so, of course, what comes after that? After they are able to break the law without breaking the law? Jim Crow, right? And so that led to what we call sharecropping. And some of us in here are old enough to remember older relatives who were sharecropping, right? What was sharecropping actually?
Slavery.
It's slavery, but how did they do it?
Keep you from getting ahead.
Keep you in debt.
They keep you from getting ahead by being in debt. So you're constantly owing them.
Right, because what they would do is say, okay, say I'm a plantation owner, and I divide my land between the four of them. They said, okay, you can farm my land, and we will share the profits, right? When you take the cotton to be weighed, I get so much and you get so much. Now you ain't got nothing, so I'm gonna get you this mule and this plow, right, on credit. And at the end of the season, we'll break it out. So you get to the end of the season, you put your cotton on the thing to be weighed, and then the man says, oh, okay, well, that's just enough for me. It's not enough, to split with you. And you gotta plant next year, so I'm gonna get you some more seeds on credit, so your yield steady going up, right? Excuse me, but you don't have any money. But our people are creative, right? And people in general are gonna find a way to do better for themselves. So what they did was at night, they would ease on out of it. They would ease on off the sharecropping property and go further west, right? They would go further west. And they would started farms and they started towns. There were like about 30 black towns, 25 of them in Oklahoma alone, right? And it was a lot of them in Nicodemus, Kansas. Boley, Oklahoma was one of the best towns. You know, they got to the point where they had a bank and, various businesses and things like that. So, of course, white people, realized that they were, easing out. And of course, technically, or by law, the mule and the plow and the wagon you got really belong to the white man, right? But you done ease on out of there with it, right? And so, they would try to stop them, just like they had slave catchers. They would try to catch people that were trying to sneak out of the South. And of course, other people went north as well to work in the growing industry, because America was becoming an industrialized nation. It wasn't so much agriculture anymore. And that's because so many machines were invented to make farming easier that you didn't need as many people, to do farming. So, in the late 1800s, people started coming north more. And by the turn of the century into the 1900s, technology has changed so much. It's sort of like it is now, like in the last 20 years, how much our technology has changed. If you ask a child now about a phone book, they're probably like, what is that? Yeah. Oh, that's where Superman changed. But they also militarily had come up with, more weapons to kill. I don't know what it is about people that we like to, we destroy each other. Yeah. And so, they started World War I, and they had invented this thing, the plane, where they could drop bombs, right? And so, the white boys were like kids with toys. I'm going to come over here and blow up your plane. I'm going to come over here and blow up your plane. Well, what they have been doing in the North is, rather than hiring all these black people in the South who needed jobs, they brought people in from Eastern Europe to work in the factories. But when World War I happened, right, you couldn't get them across the ocean. But you could make a whole lot of money selling stuff to Europe because they done blew up everything. So you could make stuff to sell to them. So they needed a workforce. And they were like, bump segregation. I need some people to come do this work, right? And black papers would, let black people know if you come north, you can get a job, you can do this work and make some money, right? And so they started, wherever you were with your train station, if you were on the southeast coast, your trains went to like Boston, New York, and places like that. If you were like in Mississippi, Alabama, the trains you called came to like Chicago, Indianapolis and Chicago. And at one point, Indianapolis was one of the best places for black people to make money. And I still have trouble believing that, but maybe K.I. can invite this guy down. I forget his name. He's at Notre Dame, and he wrote this book about black workers in Indianapolis and how they made more money than black people in other places. But that's about as much as I wanted to cover today. And what we do is that after the talk, we talk amongst ourselves, you know, we ask more questions, we share our opinions, we, or tell our stories that we know about this particular era. So I'll stop right there and let you all ask questions.
Settlement.
Sorry.
Robert Settlement.
Yeah, Robert Settlement out by Noblesville, right? Yeah.
290 acres of land owned by Elijah Robinson and his family.
They still have some of it.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Which was around the same period of time, which I think is strange because they owned all this land in Indiana and they were, black.
And then there was a place down by Everson called Loud Station.
That's me, I was born there.
Oh, really? Tell me about it.
Well, mom came here when I was a kid, but, the Knockoffs are from Loud Station, the school is on the historical registry and Loud Stations in the Smithsonian African
Oh, it
American.
is? Okay.
Grandpa was a farmer.
Are you saying Lyle?
Yeah, Loud Station.
Yeah, I think that I was possibly the last one born in Loud
Oh,
Station.
you
but- Yeah. Down the lane from Grandpa.
Yeah.
But Princeton,
Uh-huh.
and they separated Princeton and Loud Station.
Uh-huh.
And I understand that, and I think I can't remember, had our own little train station.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know this, but we had a post office. Yeah, yeah.
A fire station too?
Back in those days, I don't know. I had to get my cousin, she kept
I
up
visited,
there.
What was the question?
I visited there. It was, I thought it was
Oh,
a
okay.
fire station that you talked about too.
Oh, okay.
Train station, man.
And
Yeah.
some,
And you can go down and get tours of Stanley, Loud Station, historic, whatever.
Where's it at?
Evansville.
down by Everson.
Going toward Evansville, just
right
right into
Evansville.
Washington.
It's right between Vincennes and Princeton.
Illinois.
It's right there.
Well, Princeton's on one side of the highway and Loud Station, that's the separation they did
Okay.
back then. But apparently they did that, and the school is recognized from, on PBS or whatever, said the average person that came from Loud Station School were educators, and they are. A lot of cousins and whatever were there. The first principal of Addicts, Matthias Knockoffs,
Okay.
was my
From Loud
mom's
Station?
uncle.
Okay.
Most of them did, and I'm gonna kill you. But as an older person, I got more involved, you know, in the proudness of what came from. But I understand there were like 6 or more black African Americans in Indiana. The one is Roberts and
Wound up in Grant County,
I think so.
at
So
Weaver.
we had, apparently we had, I'd like to know more about.
What's your sister's name that does the tours? Donna, somebody.
Stokes.
Yeah, she probably have her come talk about that.
Yeah.
The black settlements.
And my question is, how is it that they destroyed so many of those towns that had the black owned stuff, and then they sprinkled these black places? But my real question is, this Harriet Tubman movie, what is that about? Why is?
You know what, Harriet Tubman, you know, those things that we know about her, she did do those things. But after the war, she moved to upper New York, near Rochester, New York. And I went up there to her, to a historic site where she bought some land. Her husband, Mr. Tubman, got killed. He had come and he was, somehow or another, I don't know, they said that the two wagons were passing each other. A white man in a wagon, and her husband come another way, and somehow they had some words. And the white man shot him and killed him. And she remarried. And one of Lincoln's cabinet members, Seward, his name was, wanted to give her some land. And she said, no, I will buy it. I said, I know that's right here. You will be, you know, I buy my own land. And she had an apple orchard, and she would sell fruits and things, and she had, and this, I found this really interesting, she had a senior citizens home on her property, and a lot of old people who couldn't work no more lived in that home. She rescued her parents, she got her parents out of slavery too. And so they're working on this historic site, and they did the renovation of the senior citizen place, but when I was up there, this has been like 15 years ago now, they hadn't done anything with the house yet. Because I remember said I was going to write Oprah, say, dear Oprah, you should, fix up this house. But if you can, and the church she went to was there, and she did work with Douglas, and she tried to get people to call her by her new married name, but nobody never would. She remained Harriet Tubman all her life. Yeah, and she died on her property there. She had been a spy in the Civil War. She and Douglas had met with Lincoln about abolition and about letting black people fight. So she fought in the Civil War, but she was mostly a spy during the Civil War.
But then that then makes me wonder, out of all this time that's passed, and you're going back, giving us a beautiful history, then what is the purpose of it now? What is it supposed to be doing for our humanness towards each other, or is it supposed to give us a pride in the fact that we were slaves, or are we going back to slavery and they're just opening up a door saying, look at what you're coming from? Just like back in those days, the only way that you can get the people to go along is to give them some motivation, to ease in why you need to be a slave. So is that what's happening now with this movie? Is it opening up a door that the hereditary movie that's coming out?
See, I told you something.
Oh, yeah, see. It's coming out. Yes.
Who's starring in Harry? Cynthia Erivo.
She's
What?
British. Her name is Cynthia Erivo.
Yeah, I think about that kind of thing in the big brotherish kind of way, is they open a door to ease it in, because it's actually something about to come. So
Well, a lot of people want black people to understand that we always have tried to take care of ourselves and to be free and to live with other people. We always have done that. And the way that America has taught children over the centuries, really, is that we knew how to hum and sing, get fat, and get cotton, and work as maids and that kind of thing. And so there are people dedicated to trying to show the humaneness, the humanness that black people are always had. And I know that's one of the reasons I wanted to teach. And as we go along, we're gonna bring it all the way up till today. But it's been a steady building from 1500 up to now. Yeah. But they just kept us out of history. I still remember, and I'm sure some of you as old as I am probably remember that when you had like world history and start talking about world history, and it would say Africa, the dark continent. Right. It might be like 2 paragraphs. Right. And that was it. So, it
They went to
didn't.
Egypt, but they weren't black.
Right.
And it wasn't in Africa.
It was in the Middle East.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, that's
The Middle East.
yeah.
And they portrayed us as half dressed out in the,
Yeah.
no sense.
And then, but it's like Du Bois was saying, this dual consciousness we have, this double consciousness of at once feeling like you are American and that's all you know, but also, using his words, a Negro that's separated and apart. And I think that, what a lot of people are trying to do is to get rid of that double consciousness and let you know you're one person. And if there are racists who don't like you, oh well. Oh, well, you know, but don't feel less than. Don't feel less than because there's this group of people who have more power than you because of armed robbery. That's what I call colonization. It's armed robbery. I mean, it ain't like I came to M's country and you said, oh, just take all my stuff. You know, I don't need it. You can have my land, my water, my gold, you can have everything.
And the people.
It was the military might that colonized the world. It wasn't because they were smarter. It wasn't because God favored them. It wasn't nothing. It was because they had the best weapons.
It's still happening.
And that's the way that is.
Right. If I can speak to what you were saying earlier, where we are now is a very precarious place because now for the first time as a people, we have the opportunity to write our own narrative.
Yeah.
And if we can be proactive in doing our history, like if y'all had to see me like 30 minutes ago, that's why I was late. It was like, I gotta get back here, but because I am relearning, I put it that way. The educational system that I was given did not equip me or educate me on who I am as a people.
Oh, no.
And what I have discovered is that as Americans, Black Americans, we are an anomaly. There has never been a people like us before because we come from some of everywhere in Africa, yet made to assimilate on this continent. And being born here, a descendant of slavery, there's nobody like me. There's nobody like you. There's nobody like us because we can, I don't know, maybe somebody in this room can literally claim where you come from and what tribe you come from in Africa. But I have not yet discovered that. I'm going to Africa in December, but what I have learned in my other subsequent excursions over there is that there's not really a relationship with them either. So they called me the white lady when I was there, okay?
Well, you know, we're going to talk about that because we're going to talk about diaspora politics.
Yes.
And one of the things that I find interesting, maybe I can show, it's a video that this woman did going back to the continent. And she was at what they call slave castles. I call them dungeons.
Yeah.
That she was talking to the kids there because they didn't know why these people keep coming over here. And they told them the story, they didn't know it either. So we have but also in the early parts, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, Africans, for lack of a better word, integrated with African Americans and Afro-Caribbean here, right? And Nigeria and other people took part in our struggle. But after the freedom of a lot of African states, a lot of those states have elites, right? Where the resources and education and things don't go to a lot of the people. It's just this elite. And they treat poor people in Africa the same way they want to treat us. We were descendants, we're descendants of slaves, right? And then when they started the diversity, what do you call it? Visa. Before the 1990s, Black people could not immigrate here. The only reason people could come from the Caribbean is because they were a part of the British Empire. And they used their British passport to come here, right? You see? But now that you have this diversity visa that started in the 1990s under Clinton, a lot of just regular African people are coming here. And they don't know anything about us, right? And they have seen things that I think upset the Black middle class here. You turn on the news, what's the first thing you see?
Violence.
Somebody, this Black person shot that Black person, right? That's what you see. And there are places in the city, and some people won't go.
I was even told
because of what they see on TV.
I was told by some Africans from Congolese who I'm friends with how they were, in order to become citizens, were told to stay, dissociate with us, indigenous Black here in America. But again, my point is this: we are now in a precarious place where we can write our narrative. And we don't need to allow anyone else to write that narrative. And I know on every platform.
Have we not always written our narrative?
Well, we may have, but I was not educated with it. It was not in the general population of understanding. if it was written, it had to be somewhere where my parents did not have access to it, and a lot of my friends' parents did not have access to it. And so I think what we can do now is make sure that our people have access to it, so that the story is told the way we know it's to be told.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Excuse me.
And I said,
And if I may interject, earlier you said that the people that saw you, they say that you are the white lady. From my experience, we would have called you the white lady because you come from the white land. Not because
Oh, I know why.
the color of your
Yes.
skin.
Oh, I got it, yes, I
It's
understand.
because our ways are not the same.
Mm-hmm,
And because we don't identify the same way,
mm-hmm.
that's why they will call
I
you.
understand.
And where are you from, sis?
I'm from Guinea.
Guinea.
and I think that a lot of the people coming over from Africa were propagandized. Like you said, we were portrayed as lazy, drunks, didn't want to work, and they come here with their own man, and it's really
And you know, I
surprising.
experienced it the other way around. I was in Senegal, and one of the places we went was to see the ambassador, and I wanted to smack the face out of his mouth. Because he was a black man. And we had these Senegalese students with us, and the students that we had taken over there too. And he was telling us, in front of these Senegalese students too, you know, stay away from these people, don't wander away from the tourist areas because, you know, something might happen to you. And I saw this Senegalese girl's face just change, you know, because it hurt her so bad. So all they do is both ways, right? Because a man friend of mine years ago, he told me that he got, the way he got over here was that a white family helped him, and they told him to stay away from us. So that's because they told him to stay away from us because we were, you know, we were criminals and this and that and this. And some of us do that. Some black people here, they are not going on 42nd and Post Road. They ain't going.
Or 38th and
Yeah. Because of the violence, the whole area has been criminalized because of a small group of people who, you know, prey on us. I think they prey on us.
But you know, do Africans that come over here, whatever color they are, do they find that they go out into the marketplace and somebody says, oh, you're not an African American, you're just black, so I will treat you with more respect.
How would they know?
I will not shoot you because.
Oh, no, that part ain't gonna happen.
No.
I'm a duty out here in New York, yeah.
No matter what color you are.
The colonization ain't ended.
You can just ask her. She
It's international.
came here and didn't know English.
Education is still very Western.
You don't even have to.
And so the ideas about
You're not white.
what's valuable is still through the same.
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, and you know, at university, it's not like, you know, my colleagues, whether they come from the islands or they come from the continent, all of us are always trying to work on diaspora politics and how we can get to get back to trying to be one people. But it doesn't filter down from professors to the student body. Every now and then they'll try to pull all the students together. Now they got this thing at IUPUI now. I hope they still have it. It was a Black Brotherhood, and these young students from the Caribbean and from the continent and from here were trying to, you know, come together and have conversations and talk about things, because you begin to see that the economic situation that you have is the same they have. When we talk about the Pan-African Congresses, that'll become clear as well. So, and I have a friend, I gotta just say this, she cracked me up. When I was at Northwestern, I had a friend there who was from Kenya, and she was like, tell me, what do I do? They treat me different. How do I deal with racism? I said, girl, I don't know.
When you find out, tell me.
She was like, I don't know what to do. What do I do?
Watch a horror movie.
Yeah.
Are we calling ourselves descendants of slaves for some reason?
Good question.
For purposes of learning history, or because we're not descendants
Did I
of
use the
slaves?
term?
Someone,
I use that term.
It's been going around.
Yeah,
Descendants,
yeah.
descendants,
I
but since slavery is a small part of our history.
Exactly.
And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not our shame. Those people, I lift up high.
Well, you know, in our first class, we talked about the fact that slavery was around the world. It wasn't just black people. I mean,
Right.
you know, in Europe, they want to say, oh, they were serfs. They were, you know, it was a fiefdom. No, it was slavery.
It was slavery.
They couldn't leave the land. They didn't pay them, right? You couldn't do what you want to do. That's slavery.
In service. They owned it in service. They could do anything they wanted to do.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was the same thing, and then you had indentured slavery here, but there was slavery in China. What about the Dalits of India? You know, the darker skinned people in India have been enslaved by the Hindi for centuries.
And homegrown Tuckahoes.
Israel
were enslaved for 400 years, so.
I have a question for this young lady. What's your name, dear?
Marie.
Marie, I'm Donna. And so, as you heard us speak, that we don't know enough about the continent. How long have you been here?
Almost 20 years now.
Almost 20 years. So, well, I don't want to ask how old you are, but what did you
I'm
know?
39.
What do you all know or learn of us and
Growing up.
how we got here? Is that part of your fabric?
Okay. She mentioned earlier that even when you guys were going through history, there was just a little paragraph about the Black continent. Even about ourselves, because of the colonization that happened, even us, we don't know about ourselves.
wow.
So let alone learning about you guys. We study America, but we study the big cities. We even study our own countries the way we study Europe or France, which was the colony. And everything we know about you guys is what we saw on TV.
Okay.
So I was a little scared when I came because I didn't know what to expect. And you know, our parents like, well, if this is what we see on TV, you have to be careful. But you have to understand that the person who's writing the narrative wants that to happen.
Right.
So we are finding out as much about you as you are about us right now. And I was telling my coworker and some of them, I say, we had a tendency to think we were better than you off of what we saw on TV. But then when we come here and we realize that the disconnect, and I always say that, the difference that I think is between you and us, we still have a connection to ancestral value.
Yep.
And you guys do not have that anymore.
Correct.
And there has to be a way to get back to that spirituality that is everybody else. Even us, we're losing that because my country is mostly Muslim. Anything that's talking about animism, we're trying to push that away. But if you look among our ranks and the people that I grew up, we have a few of us we call the enlightened. And what we do is we dig in deeper and we're pushing away religion a little bit. Because if you look at religion, if you look at it, what was Africa 2,000 years ago? If we had our own spiritual being. And I was saying this yesterday to my husband. I said the reason why I believe that African Americans are so connected to their churches is because there needs that connection. They need that connection to something. But that's all they know because they've been disconnected so long ago that they don't know where to go back.
And you still do. You know where to go back, and we
You
don't.
guys
So
don't
we
know.
had to put that connector there.
Exactly. And she was talking about going back in December. I know there's this program going to Ghana, and that's one of the ways to go back. And honestly, this is a narrative that I guess we have to write together. But at this point, we're so disconnected, and we have to deal with so many things, you know, the system and how we have to make ends meet. When is going to be the right time for us to actually see the links? I don't know.
I love my sister.
Right. It's just the constant, you're trying to, you know we have to do it. Where is the time to do it? Because everything else, we're still trying to take care of this over here, but the time is now.
But there's a highway that's being built right now, and you know, Jadena is one of those artists that actually pushing people. There's this highway that's being built, and I see people going back to Ghana. And to me, my coworkers ask me all the time, where do you think we should go in Africa? I say, start with Ghana. In my country, if you come, we only speak French. I learned to speak English here. So you won't find that connection, but start with Ghana. Ghana is a great place to start. Senegal is a beautiful place because Gorée Island is where most of the slave ships left, but they speak French over there. So it's, but what I believe is we are missing a deep spiritual connection to the land, both you guys and us, because us religion has moved us completely away from it.
Yes, yes. And I will say that CBS has got a show out, and there's an active protest against this show called Bob Hearts of Bishola. We need to get in on that and sign the petition, because again, this is someone else making a narrative about who we are as blacks. So my mother here asked about what is this American descendants of slavery. So our young people, our political scientists have come together using technology, using data to say, listen, no longer are we just going to have this conversation about reparations. We never got our check. They're standing on the shoulders of many political leaders, what Dr. King was about, and they're saying to us, we now have some framework to politically come together to present to politicians that if you want us to support you, we want to know what your agenda is. That's a good thing. Everybody's not called to the same work, but when you have, based on what my sister from the country is saying, what's the country you should say? So she's saying it right, because they are trying to pit us against one another. It's divide and conquer. And this show does that because of the mispreconceptions about one another. And if you want more information, I can share this with you. But here again is what they do to divide us. And my sister is right, we have to reconnect to
What
the
is it? That we can focus on the oppressor.
Yes.
We're gonna do what the oppressor does.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Or we can focus on our own agents
Right.
and raise up the true narrative, the true stories. Like what Sister Ramala after retirement said, well, I still want to give back to the community, my people, and tell the story.
Yes.
So while we should resist, we should also build. And that build, because this is not new. We talk about not having time. Well, if our ancestors felt that way.
But are we American descendants of slavery, or are we Africans descendants of slavery?
We still black wherever we are, and the police will still shoot your children.
Now you're going to pay.
But you're not answering the question.
Well, let me speak to it too, because I'm not going to answer the question. Because it's a debate I don't plan to engage. But I will say, we Africans that come out of enslavement.
Right. That's what
There's a
I'll answer,
exhibit.
because I feel like when she said here that slavery was.
Hold on, one person.
Okay, I'll answer because I feel like what she said, slavery is a condition that our people went through. We can't be descendants of slavery. We are descendants of African people. Some of them were enslaved. So to me, that's a condition that we endured as a people that does not define us, and we don't use that term. But we do acknowledge that it occurred.
Talk to me.
If we wrote our own history, that's the way we would probably write it.
The condition disconnected us from who we are and where we come from. There's this exhibit that's inside of the United Nations that talks about a new people. Like there's a new race of people, like Hispanics, and so they're saying African Americans are a new, because we had to create the culture that we have today that is so popular all over the world. Like that came from us going through what we went through and coming together doing what we did to create who we are. And so they say we are a new people.
I would say that we keep saying like that we're disconnected, but we're not uplifting the fact that we did carry some of the things that we left over there. So a lot of the music, a lot of the way we cook, a lot of the things we say are things we carry with us. So it's not that we're disconnected necessarily. I feel like there's still a connection there, and we unintentionally carried that with us for hundreds of years.
Well, you know, this conversation is interesting because from the 20s all the way through the 80s, practically, Pan-Africans tried to come together and do things. When the African states started to become free, right, there was one paper here by Claude Barnett who covered the the conferences that African states have with each other to try to figure out how they could build infrastructure, how they could become economic partners and trade amongst themselves and break away from Europe, right? And, I mean, if you read that stuff, you're thinking, man, Africa should be a lot further along than what it is. But, you know, you have to look at how big that continent is. In Nigeria alone, there are 300 languages.
Right. Thank you for saying
Alone. And Nigeria is only one of 54 countries, right? And they all, you know, it's hard to try to bring all those people together, all of them, from all these different places, and try to have one language and one culture. Why would a group want to give up their own culture?
Right.
So if you have all these different cultures across Africa, and I think that's something that we can do for the continent, is to suggest a way to appreciate all the cultures and just deal with the economic relations and the political relations to keep those cultures growing and strong and linking to those of us that are in the diaspora, right? But they worked really hard to try to bring us together as one. There's a Hakeem,
My booty.
and Malam Karinga, and all of them went to the 6th Pan-African Congress. And they looked at us like, what? What are you talking about? Because they were so wrapped up in socialism. You know, should we be a capitalist country or should we be a socialist country? Because they were, as M said, were educated under the same Western system that we were. Not their own, right? Not their own. So what they knew to do was to keep those relationships with the French and with the English and with the Belgians and all that, because you had this upper class who benefited from that. But nobody else at the bottom did. And so the infrastructure was never built. You know, we talk about taking medicines to different parts of the continent that are not developed yet. You can't take medicine someplace where you can't refrigerate it. You know, these things have to have electrification and all of that. And there's a lot of cultural integration and confusion to try to take a railroad, because they would be like, we're going to build a railroad from Egypt to South Africa, right? It's about 30,000 different languages and cultures going all the way across that. Plus, the French and the English and the Belgians are going to be interfering the best they can, because they ain't that going to the resources they need.
Only the Chinese are.
These days. So Chinese go and say, we don't care what y'all do, we want to buy this. And we'll build this road for you. You don't take care of the road, that's your business. But, they don't try, Chinese don't try to colonize. I guess if I get China, feel like, hell, we got enough people. That's the last thing we need is some more people.
I think just having a forum like this and educating ourselves is a start. And just from the question that you had about the Harriet Tubman, I believe that movies like 12 Years a Slave and that kind of thing is a way for the younger generation not to forget, because history does repeat itself, and we are getting to a point where we're feeling oppressed, we're feeling like we need our civil rights, and how the president has made it so divisive in the country alone.
You mean
So,
45?
yeah, that guy. But I mean, just if we tap into the amount of power that we have as a people, because it's all about feeling equal and not separated, whether we're African American versus African or white, what have you. At the end of the day, we just want to have the same rights and privileges as everyone else. So like having movies sometimes sparks that fight in someone and pride. Even if you go to like the African American Museum, the Smithsonian, or even the Freedom Center in Cincinnati, it's kind of like saying, you know what, there were people that had more problems than what I could ever imagine at this point and still persevere.
Exactly.
So how do we take the
resilience.
yes, and build on that as opposed to saying, okay, it's about poverty, it's about all of that. But how do we, the reason why they're able to succeed is because they have created the narrative and they've spoken for us, because we won't speak for ourselves. We have the woke people, but at what point do we say we all should be awake? Because until it happens to your home, until your son gets shot down, or until you get pulled over, or you miss out on a job opportunity, then it's like we get comfortable. So these movies and stuff, it's almost like reminders to us, like, hey, the fight is not over. Don't get satisfied in mediocrity, because we're going to constantly, as long as laws are put in place and people get complacent and don't vote, or people get complacent and aren't taking an active role, then you're going to continue to be feeling oppressed.
No matter what kind of black
No matter
you are.
what.
Black.
If it generates that kind of energy, yes, then okay. But then if it generates that other energy, like that's who you are, then that whole divine is, I'm better than you type of thing.
But we don't even know the full extent of Harriet Tubman's story, because unless you actually read her book, or even study or go to to where she was born, you don't know the full. All we know is that she led some people across, to freedom through the Underground Railroad. So by digging into deeper who Harriet was as a person, forget about the actor that, is portraying that person, but, some of the things about her, then it's like, oh wow, I have a deeper appreciation. So I look at it as, there's gonna be somebody that may be white that looks at it and say, you know what, I learned something, and I realize, this is a fight that they continue to have. Just being more empathetic about it. But I do see how it could, even like when Harriet Tubman was supposed to be on a $20 bill, and then now all of a sudden they're not even, right. They said 2026? Hopefully.
Yeah.
That you get distracted enough.
Yeah.
And you forget about it.
Wow.
And then it's on to something when do we stick with something together as a community and go forward and get it and then keep going?
All I was just going to say to the lady here, if you are interested, there's a great book on Harriet Tubman called Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Just speaking about the greatness of her, she had these spells at one point when she was getting fired. And there's actually, you could go to the Library of Congress and see testimonials of people who were with her. But for 10 years, prior to the Civil War, she saved over 300 plus. But she went as far as she went was Delaware and Maryland. She never went deep south. Considering the circumstances and the factors that allowed her to do that for 10 years straight. So we're talking about from 1853 to 1863, she made these numerous trips under dire conditions.
But see, at that point, Maryland was the deep south.
Yeah, Maryland, that's as far as they know. So, and then when she went to go get her mom and dad out of Maryland, that's when she went to go get her mom and dad. Not just to that, not only did she get her mom and dad, but she went back to go get her brothers and her sisters. People forget these stories that she was able to do. And then you go back to Stewart, who was the vice president for, I believe he was part of Lincoln's administration.
Yeah, Stewart.
He had told her he wasn't going to give her any more money because all of the money that he was giving her, she was giving to the senior folks home, the orchard trees, she was building bathhouses. So he told her, I'm not giving you any more money unless you take care of yourself. So that was always in the forefront of her mind, not about herself, but about helping others. And so if you do want to, there is a great book on her, Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, where it gives a detailed, significant account of the stuff that she had to go through. And before she made those trips, she learned under white men how to do the trips, to figure out some of the people that you connect with. So she had to build a plethora of networks and trust these networks that they were going to help her out to get to certain stations. So that just takes an extreme amount. And when we go to the Civil War is not won without her significant battle that took place where she actually led a regiment into battle, conquered all of the former slave plantations, killed a lot of them, and then she came back. So out of that end, people forget, she was not paid, she was not compensated ever for her military service. So when we talk about the feats that she's done, I mean, it's quite remarkable what this one lady did. And when you look at the stature of her height, it was just like, man, the fact that she was able to do this. So going back to what she was saying, the resiliency, there's just something in that biography that you can just learn about her methods, her strategies, her resilience. And the one, before I finish, she never made an excuse as to why she couldn't get out. She always had a solution. You know, even if she got stuck, it was just one point where she got stuck, and even in that moment, it was just calm, and she felt, but she found a way out. And there's testimonies that you go to the Library of Congress and read some of these testimonies of these people that talk about her remarkable bravery, courage that she just had. So it's quite remarkable.
Was she involved in the women's suffrage?
So the issue with, so she was, but she had one meeting with Sojourner Truth, but because they had differences in policy, Sojourner Truth was more, she was more what you would call an assimilationist. She was a spiritual, she was a assimilationist.
Well, you know, there's this play that
So
they
they
did,
different from each other, but they had a meeting.
one woman show about Sojourner Truth, and she says, one of the lines she says is that sometimes people confuse me with Harriet, but she said, but Harriet will shoot you.
That was true, that was the difference in the policy. Harriet would shoot you. Harriet would shoot you. She would shoot you.
But she worked with Douglas, and they had a conference in, it's a town in New York, Seneca Falls, I think it was called.
Yes, Seneca Falls.
The women's convention, right, where they did the Declaration of
Mary
Rights
Talbot,
for Women.
Mary Talbot was.
And she was there. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote it, and Susan B. Anthony, Harriet Tubman was there, and some others. So she was always a feminist as well. And she, her and Douglas, they didn't know each other real well, but they did hook up and deal with Lincoln and deal with some other things. And she didn't die, it was like 19 or something before she, 1914? Somewhere, yeah.
So she died around like 1913.
Yeah. And, but her house is there. And the other thing that's so sweet is that the church that she used to go to, this little modest church, is still standing there where she was. And there was this, at her, and it's really something, because when you go in the cemetery where she's buried, you see this big old thing for Seward, right? Great big marble, something. And you go, and hers is this little bitty, you know, thing like that. And the women of New York put that there. It wasn't anything there. But the women of New York put it there, right? And when we got there, there was like these rocks and stuff on top of it. And I asked the guy, I said, what are those rocks and pieces of tobacco up there? And they said that, you know, with Jewish women, I think it is, they come and they put those rocks and things on her grave, and she has little flowers all the time. People, you know, come and do that for her. I hope they do that for Malcolm at some point, because he has a very modest grave as well.
So Ramala, it's 3:25. Could you share with us what to expect the next time? And if you haven't signed in, please sign in. Let's give Bandele a shout out.
We're going to tell you once, because we have an election coming up in November, we want to talk about urban politics. So I'm going to jump over some stuff and go to urban politics to talk about how cities are organized, how you can intervene into the politics to get your voice heard, and how you can participate in how resources are used by dealing with the budget process. Oftentimes what we do is we go after the budget is passed, and all they have to say to you is, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but you just don't know anything happened. So you gotta be part of the budget process, and then we also are gonna talk about black mayors and what they bring to the table. And then after that, we'll go back to building.
Well, we didn't have a black mayor.
I think so. I think there's like 2 or 3 people who could be a black mayor now.
Let's put that on the agenda too.
Who do you think? Who do you think?
I don't know. Just like I didn't get into the DOC.
Vaco Silly, Maggie Lewis, right? And no, I'm not gonna say that. I'm the third person I was gonna say, but I don't even think I want to unless Leroy.
So is that all we have is 2? That's the possibility?
No, I mean,
In her mind.
In
In her
terms
mind.
of how no elections are run, and the money that would have
Now
to
when it's
go
putting
into
there,
it,
wasn't
those are the 2 that I think that can bring the resources together. You know, it's not about, if we talk about eloquence, it could be any number of people.
right? If we talk about education.
Hey, will you consider running for mayor?
But you gotta be able to put a person there who has name recognition, who people will vote for.
You know, they're like.
And I'm saying that, the reason I say Bob was silly is because he almost won a statewide.
Well, he did, it was stolen.
Yeah,
He did when he
Yeah.
was Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And we watched it in
Yeah.
plain sight while it was stolen, and the person
Yeah.
that was put in later had his own scandal and lost his seat
yeah,
himself.
which
So-
tells me he could be the mayor easily.
So we'll,
All the classes here, I'm
So-
sorry, are they all here? 'Cause I went on Boulevard.
yeah, they'll be here, I'm sorry, yeah. We're no longer operating out of 35th and Boulevard.
I know, I
Okay.
miss you.
Okay, that's all I need, that's all I wanna know.
Sorry about that.
So I'm so sorry, but that's where I was.
The next meeting is October 26th, right?
2 weeks from today.
Yeah, we're doing it every other.
Saturday.
Yeah, 2
Second and fourth Saturday.
Same time.
It's on Facebook.
Facebook, yeah.
It's on Facebook.
It's on Facebook, but it's on our website.
Every other Saturday, right?
The information on
Yeah.
Facebook.
But if everybody has signed in, if you would just distribute that information and then people share it, I think we could even make things grow. Everybody signed in. So if we distribute it to everybody that signed in, they will know and then they can tell somebody. Okay, I think this is over with.